we learn today? So it's a 2-day workshop. The first day today, we're going to focus on learning how to embrace change as we age. The main 3 focuses are going to be helping you to adapt to meet your personal needs, showing you how to adapt in order to meet your medical needs, and then adapting to meet environmental needs. And on day 2, it's going to be about learning to the first step in preserving your quality of life as we age. We'll be focusing on the importance of prioritizing your values and how to do that, and also using value-guided decision-making to identify your personal plan for aging in place. Next slide. Great. Expected or unexpected change requires adapting. All species have to adapt in order to change. I want to start with a story about Dr. Arnold Beiser. He was a Gestalt psychiatrist, also a surgeon, a national tennis champion, and also a trailblazer in sports medicine and mental health. He was struck with polio at the age of 25, just months before the polio vaccine came out. And he spent the remainder of his 40 years of his life unable to move. And in 1970, he wrote a paper that was central to the development of how ideas and about how we deal with change. And the fundamental premise of that paper is that it's best thought to think of people as these whole entities, that we are actually consisting of a body, of our mind, and also of emotions. And this perspective was really helpful because it helped people be very present in that present moment. They were able to really think about what was happening around them and ask themselves, what am I feeling in these moments right now, versus jumping to assumptions and conclusions about what's happening based on past experiences. So his whole work was dedicated in helping people become present, and that helped with adapting. And it really revolved around 2 things, focusing on self-acceptance and self-awareness. And those are the 2 things we're going to kind of focus on today, how to be more aware and how to be more accepting. We need to accept the fact that change is a natural part of life, and we also need to be able to be aware that change can be difficult. As we're aging, we have a lot more change that happens to us a lot faster, at a much faster pace. And the change that we experience as we're aging also impacts many more areas of our life than any other time before. And we need to be aware of how we're feeling about that, because change can be extremely overwhelming. It can completely knock you off your course. It can be, just make you feel, lost. You can feel very confused, very lost, and change can be very challenging. And so we want you to focus on today that adapting is essential, not only to survive, but to thrive. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today, that all species require adapting to change. Our next slide. Some of the greatest perceived barriers to quality of life and some of the changes we face as we age can be you're faced with a terminal illness. You could be living with a chronic or progressive illness. And you could also be struggling either as an individual or as a caregiver, managing and navigating challenges and changes that are affecting your personal, medical, and environmental needs. So what makes some people adapt better than others? Does anybody have any idea or any thoughts about why do some people adapt better than others? Anybody have anything to comment? I'll jump in. So from our experience, Michelle and I, as occupational therapy practitioners, we often, we're faced with people with a variety of medical conditions or limitations. And, we've been clinically trained to help people physically adapt. So we will teach them how to do things differently. And we've noticed that not everybody is carrying over those recommendations. For example, if we're teaching someone how to use a walker, there are those that will learn in that therapy setting how to use that walker, how to safely use the walker, understand the benefits of that walker. But then they go home and there isn't this sustainable carryover. Why is that? And what we realized is that you don't just have to physically adapt and do things differently, but that it's really important that we mentally adapt and that we also emotionally adapt. So, for example, with that walker, if mentally your thoughts around using that walker revolve around, oh, if I use that walker, I'll get weaker, I'll become more dependent on it, or using that walker can make me look old. You're not mentally on board with using it. And then emotionally, we're asking you to pick up carpets or make clear pathways so that you can functionally and safely use that walker. But at an emotional level, you don't want to pick up those carpets. Those were your moms, those were your grandmothers. You're somehow emotionally attached to these items that we're asking you to remove. So we could spend all day teaching you how to physically use that walker, but if you're not mentally and emotionally on board and adapting, then there's not going to be this consistent carryover to these changes. So next slide. So to sum it up, the answer is thriving requires us to mentally, emotionally, and physically adapt in the face of change. We're, again, like that Dr. Beiser, we're very complex beings. We're the combination of mental, emotional, and physical beings. We have thoughts, we have feelings, we have emotions, and all of them have a great impact on how we do things. So basically, adapting requires us to not only make physical adjustments, but also to make these adjustments to how we think and to how we feel. And basically, our best life is lived when all three aspects of ourselves, our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions, align up and they support each other. So it's very difficult to carry out a new action if my thoughts are actually saying something to me that contradicts that. Or it's very difficult to carry out, even think about something differently if my emotions have me feeling differently about it. So I can tell you logically that, remove those carpets to prevent a fall. But if emotionally it's a real big struggle to remove those carpets, then again, we're not going to be able to support that thought and you're not going to be able to carry out those actions. So to truly flourish in the face of change, we need to master our ability to adapt as a whole person. So what do we mean by a whole person? That means that we just can't think about doing things differently. Again, we need to be thinking about them differently and feeling differently about our situation and about how we're facing these challenges. So next slide. And please let me know if I'm going too fast because I can talk super fast. So the mental aspect of being, that component is how are we thinking? What is the reasoning we're using behind what we're thinking and what we're doing? It's about remembering. Our mental aspect is about how well we're learning or processing new information. It's what we use for problem solving. The emotional aspect of ourselves has everything to do with our feelings, our beliefs. What are our beliefs around this situation? Our emotions are about our moods. And these emotions link our thoughts and actions. They actually come in between. Again, you may think something and understand it as very practical and you understand the safety risks and you may know what to do and act in terms of use that walker, that's your new action. But those emotions that come in between, how you feel about those thoughts and actions, they're not in alignment. There's this disconnect, and that disconnect then affects how well you're adapting. The physical aspect of our being is the biological functions, our senses, and how we move and interact with the world. So this is where that self-mastery comes in. This is where, it's our ability to intentionally and deliberately and purposely focus those thoughts, and that we're not just going into this automatic pilot, automatic reaction, but that we're able to deliberately choose what we're thinking, deliberately choose how we're going to feel, and then deliberately act. And that's that self-mastery that involves this sense of awareness and sense of acceptance. change, as I said, change can definitely knock us off our path. And our intent today is to help you get back on your path, be able to get that sense of control, sense of competence, and sense of well-being back into your life where quality of life comes into play. Next slide. Oh, sorry, you can go back again to independence. And so that leads us to the question of, what is independence? How do we define independence? Does anybody want to join in and just let me know, what do you think independence means? How do you define independence? A lot of people think of independence as just their ability to functionally perform. And actually, independence originated regarding sovereignty, regarding how an entire group of people were performing. It was about breaking away as a country from other countries and being a sovereign country where you're not dependent on other countries. Independence in its original form was never referring to personal independence. It wasn't, it was always revolving around how a colony was going to break away from other governments and to become self-governing. When we refer to independence, which would be the next slide, we're actually talking about this internal, self-guided, cooperative way of being. The American Occupational Association defines independence as a self-directed state of being. Independence goes beyond functional performance, meaning your ability to do something, and includes the freedom to demonstrate a sense of control, competency over engaging in meaningful activities in a satisfying way, regardless of the amount of help or assistance you need. Like I said, Michelle and I have worked with clients with varying degrees of disabilities and limitations, yet they felt very independent. So you may not be able to physically get up and turn a light switch on, but if you have control over your environment, and I can say, Alexa, turn the lights on, studies and research has shown that sense of control is really what being independent is all about. And then also feeling competent. I'm sorry, someone have something to say? I'm sorry, I thought I heard someone. And it's also that sense of competence over your environment to achieve that task. So we want you to start thinking about independence in regards to personal independence, not this doing something without any external assistance. Honestly, no one's independent. We're all very much interdependent. And I know COVID really helped me see that. I mean, I thought I was a very independent person, but when you go to a gas station to fill up your car, I was very much dependent on the person before me filling up those gas tanks so that I can do that. Going to an ATM, I was very much dependent on that ATM machine was able to respond to my card and give me the cash that I needed. Same thing with grocery stores. Many people, you're an independent person, you go to the grocery store, but if those shelves are not stocked and full and I can't shop, it made me fully aware of how very much we are independent or dependent, basically interdependent on a lot of other people and factors. So I want you to start thinking of independence in a different way. Think of it as personal independence, and it's that sense of control, it's that sense of competency, and that sense of well-being, and being able to participate in a task regardless of how you're performing that task. You can go to the next slide, please. So self-mastery is the foundation of personal independence. So it's that sense of control, that sense of well-being, and that sense of competence. There's some great research that explains and shows how valuable sense of control is and how sense of control leads to quality of life. One research that was performed was on individuals living in nursing homes. When they were given a sense of control over their daily schedule, when they were going to eat, when they were going to shower, what they were going to eat, choices on their menu, that group of individuals had a greater sense of quality of life. They really felt their quality of life was improved by having that sense of control. Another really interesting research on sense of control involved electrical shocks, low voltage electrical shocks. And when participants were given the choice between having control over when they were going to receive these shocks or whether they were just going to be random, even though if you had a sense of control and you got to decide when you would receive them, it would be a greater voltage and more painful. If you just let it randomly happen, it would be a more mild shock. Most participants chose to have control over when they were going to receive those shocks. So it just goes to, just showed us how valuable that sense of control is and how important it is and an important role it plays. Sense of well-being. There's some great research that shows that fostering positive emotions as we age leads to higher quality of life, as well as research showing that well-being derives from the extent to which we design a life that integrates and is congruent with our values. So again, well-being played a huge role in your quality of life, linked to aligning those values. Another research showed that psychological well-being is a multidimensional and complex construct that shows that achievement of personal goals and values help us feel alive, and that having that sense of well-being, that you can have, well-being, control, competence, all of that connects you to feeling more alive, which then gives you that greater sense of quality of life. Other research connects that competence builds confidence, confidence leads to quality of life. Having that confidence to know that you can achieve a task regardless of how, regardless of the amount of assistance. You're confident that your caregiver is going to be there. You're confident that this adaptive equipment will help you. It's not so much how you do it, but it's the fact that you feel satisfied in having competence that it can get achieved. As occupational therapists, we talk about it as being occupational competence. And that's achieved by enhancing your personal state of being self-effective, your self-efficiency, rather than focusing on functional improvement. So basically what they're saying is it's not so much how you achieve something, but that you're participating in something that's very, very valuable and meaningful to you. Any questions or anything you'd like me to repeat or want to touch more on before we move on? Anyone? And I know it's totally different. Independence has always been thought of as, again, doing something without any other assistance, no other support. But when we really, really tease that back, no one's independent. The most successful people are very much dependent on a vast amount of a variety of other people to make them successful. The most successful business owners have amazing lawyers, amazing accountants, amazing marketing personnel. And so, again, it's success and independence. It's not about how well you can do something without that support of others. It's about that self-mastery. Now I'm going to turn it over to Michelle.
Yeah, someone, I have somebody in the comment that indicated it was, freedom to decide and make choices. And that's absolutely correct. We, it seems like when we age and our physical bodies are going to change, that's inevitable. The health and the healthcare industry is very focused on what your levels of independence. If you've ever been in rehab, you've heard that probably before. We're getting you, as therapists, we try to get you back to your prior level of independence. And as we have many doctors and specialists, we're very focused on the parts of your body and how well you're doing. And so I think we all know that independence is about freedom to make choices and have decisions, but we lose sight of it as we age because I think our physical performance and how well you're doing something, and do you need help with bathing or dressing or toileting or making meals or taking care of things. People are very focused on those aspects of independence, and we lose sight of really true independence, like Melissa was saying, is your ability to adapt our thoughts, feelings, and actions. And we have to learn to reinvent ourselves. And that's where the name Reinventing Independence came from. It's because we aren't static beings, and we are constantly faced with change. Our quality of life is always going to be affected if we are not continually adapting our thoughts, our feelings, and actions around the changes that we are experiencing. And so we want you to have self mastery over that. We want you to maintain that sense of control over those areas. And sometimes it can, I think when we age, we are bombarded, like Melissa said earlier, by so many avenues, so many areas that are impacted, and it can just feel overwhelming, and you just feel unsuccessful. You don't feel independent. These are just a lot of the common things that we hear a lot. And it starts to affect your mental health and well-being. And so we try to put you back in the driver's seat, and understanding that independence isn't about how you physically can do something. It's about your sense of control, your well-being, and competence. And we also try to break up change and challenges into 3 areas. So it's just a little bit more digestible instead of everything just feeling bad and overwhelming sometimes. So we categorize 3 areas of challenges: personal challenges and changes that are going to lead to personal needs, medical challenges, and then also environmental challenges. And so we're going to talk about those 3 different areas, and then want to kind of give you some strategies on how to adapt in those areas. So personal challenges, are we're mental, emotional, and physical beings. So our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions need to be considered when we're managing and navigating aging. As a therapist, I know I can't just come in and work with your body if you've had a stroke or you've had an amputation. I have to address your feelings and your loss and the grief. I need to address how you think about that situation, because you're an entire person that's sitting in front of me. And so a lot of times I think in the healthcare industry, you get very compartmentalized, and we do focus on the body. And it's important that we take the time and even advocate for ourselves to ask for time and to ask for support to help us manage and navigate the thoughts and feelings that we may have associated with something that was a physical change in our body. The second area of adaptation are medical challenges. We have to be an active participant in adapting to the medical changes that occur within us. We talk about health management and having the health management skills to adjust to the physical body changing, how we navigate and communicate with healthcare professionals, and a never-changing healthcare landscape that it's hard for even us to keep up with. Then the third area was environmental challenges, and we need to be an active participant in adapting to our environment, how we are managing that space around us. You do it when you're younger and you have other people moving in and out of your home, and you switch bedrooms and you move all the time. But as we age, we tend to have less resources and the energy to adapt our environment, and it becomes very critical and a big safety issue for us. And so let's look at those, that personal area first. Actually, we're on environment. Let's go back to the personal barrier, flip back a little bit. Yeah, let's stay there for just a minute. Our initial reaction to change can significantly influence our ability to adapt. And resisting, denying, avoiding, and jumping into impulsive actions are the most common reactions that we have as humans. And so that sometimes it feels like we're doing something when we jump into action, but a lot of times those actions aren't thought through. And so you get an immediate, oh, that feels better, but in the long run, that wasn't the right choice. And so in order to remove those barriers of avoiding, resisting, and denying, we have to adapt our thoughts and adjust our perspective and gain clarity about what is important to us and what we value. And tomorrow we're going to spend time talking about putting a plan in place. We always say you have to have a plan in place to age in place. And our plan is based off of our values and what's important to us. They help ground us, and they give us that structure to pause, look at things differently, and step back and make a plan that is focused on our needs and maybe not everybody else's needs. Adapting our feelings. This is when we integrate our new experiences into our own personal story. We all carry personal stories that support or sometimes don't support what our behaviors and our actions need to adapt to. And so your personal story is how you perceive your life and what is happening. And it's deeply intertwined in our emotional responses to change. And so part of adapting our thoughts and our feelings is integrating those new experiences into the story. And then the third action would be adapting our actions, which is modifying our daily routines to support our values. As occupational therapists, we talk about occupational participation, and these are the things that we do during the day that give us meaning and purpose. Do we need to learn new skills? Do we have to adapt how we're doing something? And maybe we need to adapt how we're engaging in the community to gain support. And so those are the three ways that we're going to remove our personal barriers. And we're going to talk a lot more about that tomorrow.
I just want to add to what Michelle, go back to that other slide. I'm sorry, real quick. To add to what Michelle was saying, the key thing to really focus on when it comes to adapting these thoughts, feelings, and actions is values. When we're in any kind of situation where we're facing challenges or change, we can get very reactionary and we can catastrophize. We could all of a sudden just get so overwhelmed and we focus so much on the problem that there's no way out because we don't see a solution. But when we can anchor our thoughts and our feelings and our actions to what we value and recognize that I can't control this situation that's happening, but I do have control over prioritizing my values and still holding tight to what I value. That can't be taken away. So values and, gaining clarity about what our values are, looking at our story and making sure that we're narrating what's going on in a way that's supporting what we value. That's a positive perspective. And then also making sure that the actions that we're doing, we said earlier, Michelle mentioned, you can jump into these impulsive actions and try to solve. But if those actions don't align with what you value, then those impulsive actions are not going to have the benefit and be a real sustainable, positive solution. So it's really about pausing and identifying what you value, and then realizing that in this situation, all this change, I can still hold tight and have control over keeping those values and prioritizing those values. Just wanted to emphasize the values role.
And we'll give you access to a values worksheet tonight. And we want you to look at it because tomorrow when we start to look at your plan and what's important to you and making sure that you prioritize and you identify a plan to support your needs as you age, that you have those values in the forefront. And so we're going to touch more on that tomorrow, and we'll give you a sheet to look at tonight just to kind of get you thinking. You can circle it and hang on to it, and then we can talk about it tomorrow. And we'll touch base at the end about that too. Medical barriers to adapting. As we age, managing our health becomes very complex. Just like I said earlier, the changes in the healthcare landscape. I know I manage all of my mom's healthcare through all the different portals, and I am a pretty computer literate person, but it is overwhelming with all the different agencies and who talks to who and what records. And just trying to get a human to schedule an appointment or get an answer can be challenging. I know a lot of older adults, like in my mom's community, don't have internet or access to computers. And so it can be a real challenge just to navigate the healthcare landscape. If you've gotten a new diagnosis and have new symptoms, new medications that you have to manage, you have changes in your physical health or your physical abilities, there are a lot of medical conditions that can impact your quality of life. And if you need to adapt, we have strategies for adapting. And that next slide, solutions would be education, definitely accessing education even through your insurance company. I know many of them, especially have like diabetic management programs. Age is a great resource in the community that helps to educate. Specific therapy services. We're occupational therapists, so we're always going to say go to occupational therapy. But there's other speech therapy, physical therapy, nutrition services, just overall looking at health management specifically. So, that can be coping strategies, pain management, med management, things to help support the medical barrier that you have. And at first, and it begins with identifying when things are just not going well at home and you feel like I'm overwhelmed. Looking at, is this a personal barrier that I'm experiencing? Are these thoughts, feelings, and actions? Or now maybe, is this just a medical issue? Is this a medical issue? And then I need to focus on these area of solutions. And then the third area was environmental. Melissa and I are both certified aging in place specialists, and as occupational therapists, we know that environmental barriers are a very significant factor to people being able to age in place, being able to age with health, and often people are displaced from their homes. Falls are a very high cause of death, and they're very expensive. They can be a life-altering event. And so we help people have better space management skills and have an awareness of their safety, accessibility, and function. And so when we talk about safety, that's fall hazards, adequate lighting, modifications to living spaces. That can also be social safety if your environment, if it's not a good fit for you because it's not safe to go walk at night. Your environment, sometimes people have lived in this home for many years and all of a sudden the neighborhood has changed around them. So your safety is your physical safety as well as your psychological safety and well-being. Accessibility. Our home and communities are often less accessible than our mobile and sensory abilities need them to be. It goes beyond just in your own home that may have like a step down into a living room or a couple of stairs to get in or out. And sometimes it's just access to amenities, access to, a grocery store and there's no clear sidewalk or a lit sidewalk, or it's not smooth, or it's a sidewalk that just goes to nowhere. We have a lot of those around too. And the third area is function. How are you functioning in your home? We're creatures of habit, and we always tend to do things, the way we have always learned how to do them. And sometimes it just takes an extra set of eyes to look in your home and to say, gosh, instead of doing it this way, now that your balance is not great, or now that you're taking a medication that's making you dizzy in the mornings, let's look at changing your showering routine till the afternoon. So, how are you evolving as you live with a chronic and progressive illness? How are you evolving in your space, and are you modifying that space and taking a look at things with a different lens? And so it does take, I think, a second set of eyes sometimes. And so our solution many times is a home assessment, either by a certified aging in place specialist or an occupational therapist, to come in and look at your home and make recommendations. And, when we assess, we have, A, B, or C, because sometimes you don't want, we have to find a good fit for you. I've had some people that didn't want to remove a rug because they love that rug and it was very special to them. Well, we hung it on the wall as a piece of art, and that was great because it was still a part of their room. And so, we're not there to help you, to turn your life upside down. We're there to honor what is important to you and what is valuable to you. And that's why we rely so heavily on values, so that we can you can communicate to us what is important that you still want. And then we can find a good fit, because we want to match your living space to your abilities and limitations, so that it still reflects who you are. So solutions, OT, home assessment, and then the use of adaptive equipment and modifications. So, many times people are resistant to grab bars because they don't want to have a big silver metal bar. Well, they make lots of great grab bars that match your your fixtures so that it doesn't look like something. And so we have come a long way in universal design and things like that. So we just want to focus on safety, accessibility, and function. All right. Next slide. Okay. So challenges in life fall under those three key areas: the personal challenges, medical challenges, and environmental challenges. And I want to maybe do some self-reflecting on the next slide. How well do you think you are at adapting to personal, medical, or environmental changes in your life? How well do you think you are at aging in place? And how would you rate your sense of control, your sense of well-being, and your sense of competence? And sometimes you might feel like you have an okay sense of control, but your sense of competence may be very low because you've gotten a new diagnosis and you're not really sure about how you're managing it. And so sometimes it can be three separate ratings for sense of control, well-being, and competence. But I want you to think, and can you identify if you were struggling with personal challenges, medical challenges, or environmental challenges, or all three? What we'd like is for people to not just feel overwhelmed or a sense that aging is hard, because it's a natural part of life. It's something that we want you to experience, and we want you to feel empowered and emboldened to be on this continuous journey of life and not be overwhelmed, and to be able to identify, is the area of concern or what's not working in my life right now, is it because I need to adapt my thoughts, feelings, or actions to overcome those challenges to maintain quality of life? Or do I have barriers in the way of adapting? Am I the person in the way? Am I having a hard time wrapping my head around that? Again, I'm going to use the walker example, that I think people that use a walker look old, and it's going to make people think I'm decrepit and old, and that's an emotional barrier. Is that where the challenge lies? If I'm falling multiple times because I'm not using that piece of equipment, then that is where the adaptation, the adapting needs to happen. And we would help encourage you to work on what is it about that walker use, and what is the story you're telling, around that walker. Or is it you're denying a situation that is happening? And do I have feelings about and beliefs about a diagnosis? And I'm avoiding going and learning about that diagnosis because I am feeling afraid of that unknown. Again, are those my thoughts and feelings that are getting in the way of actually pursuing that medical care that I need? What the result of that is frequent trips to the hospital. My caregivers and my adult children are stressed, and the secondary symptoms are definitely something that we can identify as not working, but it starts with me understanding that actually I can't take that first step to get more information about my diagnosis so I can better self-manage that diagnosis. Or my actions getting in the way. Am I resistant to learning how to dress myself with only using my left arm because I've had a stroke and I've been right-handed, and I can't move forward with putting a grab bar in because I have specific thoughts and feelings around it. And it's hard. I mean, changes, you're being hit, all of us as we age are being hit in so many different areas. It can be overwhelming. And maybe it's just, I medically need to adapt better. I'm on board with this diagnosis and I've gone to the doctor, but I am not doing a good job managing my health like I need to. I need to pay closer attention to the signs and symptoms of what's happening with me. So I don't need to put the focus on the adaptation and the growth in myself, but I need to put the focus on my routines and my habits and how I'm managing my medical condition. Or do I need to modify my environment? And it's really, I've checked the box. I'm adapting. My thoughts, my feelings, and my actions are all on board. I'm managing my medical. I'm making it to my doctor's appointments, and I'm doing everything I need, but I keep falling. And I keep falling at home every time I'm in the bathroom. Well, then let's look at what's happening in that bathroom, in that environment that may need to support your needs. or maybe there's a medication issue and, or a fatigue issue, but something is still triggering it. And so we help to try to organize it this way so we can tease out, help you tease it out. So it's not just as overwhelming, because a lot of times when we have people.
Sorry, go ahead. I was
No,
just saying a good example. Michelle and I worked with a 90-year-old client, and same thing. We used helping her identify where are these barriers she was having with aging in place. And so we looked at medically, she had a recent fall. She went through therapy. She physically got her strength back. She was identified what medications were making her dizzy. We replaced, we helped her, empowered her to communicate with her physician to request a different medication. So medically, we knew that she identified there was no medical barrier. Environmentally, she was living on the first floor. She didn't have stairs in her apartment. And so there was no medical or no environmental barrier to her quality of life, to aging in place. But she still felt like her quality of life was not how she wanted it to be. And she identified, because then we went to, the third component or the third area to look at was personally. And it was like, do you think maybe you're thinking about, this particular situation? It was the walker. Again, I'm using the walker. She had fallen. Her medications had made her dizzy. She had broken her ankle. So she had therapy. She changed her medications. But now she's having to use a walker. And she was really resistant to that. She was not on board. And it was really her quality of life was being compromised, because every single day prior to that fall, she was going for a walk. And where her apartment was, she had a trail in the woods. And so I asked her, so she determined that she was personally having some personal barriers. And so I asked her, what is it about going for that walk that you value? So when you're not able to move through a challenge, values are so key to helping you break that struggle and create some momentum to get back on track to the life that gives you quality and that you value. And she identified that she valued feeling fit, getting fresh air, socializing with other people in the neighborhood when she would go out. So I said, so what is it about using the walker personally that you're not on board with? And that's when she identified, because I said, what are your thoughts? And she's like, well, if I use this walker, I'm going to have to use it forever. Well, what are your thoughts about using it forever? Well, it'll make me weaker. And I was like, well, actually, you're not exercising every day and going on that walk on that trail. So that's what's making you weaker. The walker's actually helping you get stronger. So she had to realize that her thoughts regarding that walker were really not in aligning with what she valued. She valued getting out, but her thoughts about that walker were keeping her from doing that. And so having 3 areas to focus on to identify those challenges, make challenges not seem so overwhelming. And then identifying what component, if it's personal, is it my thoughts? Is it my feelings? Is it something I'm doing? If it is medical, what are on my health management? Am I not taking my meds? Am I not going to my doctor's appointments? Do I not understand signs and symptoms? What's medically in the way? And then in the environment, is my environment not safe? Can I not access the bathroom, my bedroom, the front door? And am I not functioning as well as I want to? Once you could identify where, and then we can identify why you value that, we can have new thoughts, new feelings, and new actions to work with, and you're not stuck. And that's how you adapt and maintain your quality of life. And we have so many examples of, different situations with different clients where those were the things, when we broke it down into these chunks with these components to look at, they were able to really identify that single factor and then look at it in a new way, talk about it in a new way, and then act around it in a new way. They were able to restore their quality of life. And that's what this is all about, adapting to these changes that happen as we age. And, and they happen so much faster. We have so much more change to deal with. Learning how to adapt, then we can preserve that quality of life regardless of these changes. That our quality of life isn't contingent upon no change. Our quality of life is contingent upon how well we're adapting to those changes.
Yeah, just to pick another example of driving. Driving, is a common area of concern. And we've met with many people that are, as they age, they don't feel safe driving, but they don't want to give up driving because, again, they want to have the freedom to get in their car and drive and make choices, and they've always been able to. And sometimes, we usually talk to people and say, has there been other times in your life when you haven't been able to drive? And people usually say, oh, well, we only had one car the first, 10 years of our marriage, or I never drove after I had kids because, I couldn't, or I didn't drive after surgery. And they didn't have the same feeling about driving then because it was just a part of what was happening in their life. And they had a sense of control over when it was happening and what, how to adapt to that. And so, we many times break down, when you are driving, why are you driving? Where are you going? And what is it about driving that you want? And we worked with a lady the other day. She's hardly driving at all, but she drives every day to Chick-fil-A on Tuesday and grabs, a big salad and some chicken nuggets, and she divides that in, and that's a meal for 2 days. And she likes that outing, and she wants Chick-fil-A. But actually, when we worked with her, the physical act of driving did not matter to her. She just wanted to make sure that she was going to Chick-fil-A on Tuesday. And so we can certainly put a wide scope of support in there to make sure that she is able to meet her needs and still gets what she values out of that experience and that outing, but doesn't have to physically drive. And she really didn't even want to drive anymore. She just didn't, wasn't sure how to problem solve, still, being able to participate in something that she really valued.
She wanted to maintain that sense of control of, when she can go and where she's going. And, that was the key thing that we were able to help her focus on and realize what she valued.
And shopping. She likes to wander around and shop. And her only child, which was her son, did not value shopping or wandering around. And so they decided to just utilize a caregiver and pay that caregiver once a month and take her to the grocery store and let her, shop to her heart's content. And that checked boxes. But it was just, the approach prior to that was, you can't drive, you're not safe, and let's not do that anymore. And that doesn't feel good because there's value behind why she was doing that in the first place. And we have to do better to advocate for ourselves and why that's important. Even with doctor's appointments, we're rushed through, and a lot of times we don't get the time that we need, or we don't have those time to provide questions. And we coach a lot of people, if knowing these 4 things are very important to you, then let's write them down ahead of time and let's manage our health better. Let's take these questions to that appointment, or let's even try to get them into the portal to the doctor ahead of time so that they can know that they're coming. Next slide. I think we got 5 minutes left.
Yes.
So we're going to email you these slides, and we're also going to email you a values worksheet, and it can be found on our website too. But we wanted you to think tonight for homework about, what personal values do you have that are very meaningful to you? So as you age, even this is the same exercise we do with people that are facing a terminal illness and really critical times in their life when they're trying to preserve their quality of life all the way through their end of life. And what are your core values? What is important to you? And think about, are my actions and decisions guided by these values? I know for me personally, I may value exercise and cooking for my family and playing games with my family. And I may look at my current schedule and say, no, my actions and decisions are not being guided by these right now. My life's out of balance, and I need to think about and do things a little bit differently. Do you have something, Melissa?
And just a way to test those waters. It's, quality of life is directly related to how well we're aligning our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions with what we value. And that is something, people automatically assume that any kind of loss of function or any kind of change automatically means the quality of your life has to be impacted. And it's like, that means then we're all going to struggle no matter what, because change is constantly happening. We have no control over that. It's a natural part of life. Life is, an evolving experience. You can't stay in the same place forever. Life is always changing. So how well we adapt, is really dependent upon aligning those thoughts, feelings, and actions with what we value. Knowing what those values are gives us that sense of control, because we have control over prioritizing those values. We have control over, what we're thinking, and making sure that our thoughts are revolving around what we value. They're not revolving around catastrophizing and focusing on the problem. If we focus on what we value, that will help us see solutions to come out of that. And so it's just really important to start with identifying. Tomorrow, when we pick up, we'll be helping you with, creating this plan. It takes a plan in place to age in place. It takes a plan in place, to maintain quality of life in all circumstances in life. And so the first step in creating that plan is knowing what your values are. So we just wanted you to, spend a little time using this worksheet and kind of going through it, and circle all the values that jump out at you. And then we always ask, prioritize the top 5. What are your top 5? And that really requires you kind of doing some self-reflecting and asking yourself why. And then, am I living out these values? Am I letting these values guide me, or am I just running through life putting out fires? And am I letting fear, guide my decisions? Am I impulsive? Am I reactionary? So any questions about anything we went over, or any comment?